And welcome, as they say. I'm allowed to start now, apparently. Where's the monitor officer? The 6:15 was watch. So we're allowed to start. So welcome, and I think we've only got a bite list from Councillor Micklewhite, and then that we're all here, which is great to see. Shall we move swiftly on to the minutes of the minutes of the last meeting, to make sure that they're a true and accurate record. Are you all content, members? Yes, you're happy for me to sign them as such? Yes? Super, I'll do that then. Do we have any members' interest to declare? I'll take the silence rule, says no, and move swiftly on to item 4 on the agenda, which is the annual audit letter, pages 11 through 18. This is effectively the final part of the audit for 2015-16, and I believe confirms the unqualified audits of the final statement and unqualified opinion on the value for money assessment. And obviously we approved the statement of accounts at our September meeting. So we should stop there then. Would you like to say a few words around your report?
Yes, I mean, we've got a few reports on the agenda, and this is one that I'd like to say less than the others, because essentially it doesn't say any more than was on in the last report that came to committee, which is the key one, our ISA 260 report, which has more detail. This is simply a requirement to complete an annual audit letter, which is also, the idea is that it is something of more digestible by the general public, and is normally put on the website for that purpose. So there's really nothing in it that you haven't already heard before, and you've summarised it already. Happy to take any questions on that report.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the auditors? Fabienne?
I've just got one question, which is why is there a need to save a further 4 million over the next 5 years? On the first page, page 13 of the total report, but page 3 of your letter, it goes on to say the authority needs to identify further savings of approximately 4.4 million over this period. And I just wanted to know why was there, that seems a lot of money.
Well, this just reflects the way that you planned in your medium-term financial strategy, and in the previous report we went in, there was a slightly longer section on the value for money conclusion. When we're looking at value for money, one of the key things that we look at is how are you planning to deploy your resources, so how you plan to use your money, your people, your physical assets. These are the criteria, or some of the criteria that we're supposed to look at in coming to our value for money conclusion. So looking at your medium-term financial plan is a key part of that, and obviously the ongoing challenge that local government faces in terms of future funding is, if you like, the overarching challenge, and that's what we're reporting on.
So that 4.4 million, I read it as the projected decrease in receipts, presumably, that we will get from various...
It's not quite as simple as that. I would have thought it's the gap between, so you forecast your income, you forecast your expenditure, and it's the gap between those two.
Yeah.
And so you plan to close that gap each year with either additional income or further savings.
Right. Isn't that covered really under item 11 as the first principal item on the risk register, which is the grant income coming in from government and all the other stuff that goes with it? Any other questions? Are we happy? I think the technical term is to note the letter. Are we all happy, members, to note the letter? I think the next thing we do is invite you to speak on the external audit plan, which I think sets out the 3 principal risks that you want us to be aware of.
That's absolutely right. So, yes, I want to spend just a little bit more time on this because, if you like, the two key things we do is we present a plan and then we present a final report against the plan when we've completed our audit. One of the things I would highlight on page 1 is the team. So, I think most of you have seen me before. I'm the director responsible for the audit. My name is John Gory, for those who don't know me, but I did want to introduce Asim Iqbal here, who is taking on the role of the manager of the job. He has actually been working on the audit for the last couple of years, but he's stepping up, if you like, a level in terms of his role, and he'll say something about the risks in a minute. So just moving on to the introduction on page 2, just to remind you, as we've actually covered already, there's two different key bits to the audit. There's the financial statements audit and the value for money arrangements work. So the audit plan covers what we're going to do on each of those. On page 3, we begin to talk about how we do our risk assessment, and if you like, we look at a population of risks and we select those which we think are the most significant. And Asim will say a bit more about those, the 3 risks on page 4.
Thank you. In terms of the risk, the first one that we have put is in terms of the pension. So, because this is the 3rd year in terms of triennial valuation, and the numbers in the accounts are significant in terms of the pension liability and assets. So what we do, like after every 3 years, there's a triennial valuation process where the data is gathered by the pension fund, and then they send that across to the actuary in terms of valuing the whole pension fund and then individually different employees. So this year, basically, they get the information from the council and then send that across to the actuary. So in terms of how actuary works is they involve too much of estimations, and then they look into the specific area and different estimation techniques, and also the portfolio of the investments which they have. And that's where we need to give ourselves the assurance that the numbers in the accounts are being properly looked in by the management, and they have challenged the actuary in terms of the assumptions that are being proposed. So for us, in order to cover that risk, we put that as a main significant risk in the plan, and then what we do as we go along is then whatever the data is being transferred to the pension fund, make sure that is complete and accurate. And when we have received the final report from the actuary, management properly have thought through what, in terms of estimation techniques that they are suggesting, are adequately appropriate for us in order to then put the figures in the accounts. So that's where we kind of cover the pension risk. In terms of the 2 other risks, the revenue recognition and the management override of controls is basically our standard risk that we put in our plan. So in terms of revenue recognition, because there are always incentives to recognize, and that is kind of more applicable for the public into the private sector. But in terms of public sector, because there are too much pressures on local government at the moment, and how to increase their income and then show a kind of balanced budget. So that's where we kind of look into some of the income streams and make sure that the revenue that is recognized in the financial statement is complete and accurate. And then in terms of management override of controls, we make sure that in terms of all the controls which are in place at the moment, they are good enough to secure the overall processes and the management in terms of the risk. So that's kind of the generic risk that we put in our plan.
Should we just pause there actually and see whether there's any questions on that?
Members?
Yeah, Chair, the only thing I would note actually is I found the overall model a little bit difficult to read in terms of the clarity. That's not pertaining specifically to this point, only for future reference in terms of the size of the numbers.
I'll ask Councillor Gillot to sort that out for us.
Yeah, thank you.
On the pension fund, what involvement do we have with the overall scheme in terms of our representation as an authority on the for the trustees of the scheme?
Any colleagues?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, can I add something? Like in terms of the pension fund, there is the overall pension fund board at the moment, which oversees the whole pension fund. I think Audra is one of the sitting members in that board. So for council, for Daventry, she's one of the representatives, and then she basically, in terms of the whole process, she has the dialogues with the pension fund and with the actuary. So that's the kind of a link between pension fund and Daventry.
Because given the positive market and the changing the gilts, one would hope that the pension fund looks better than it did previously on its triennial valuation. When will we get those figures?
The sign-up date is 31st of March, so hopefully in first week of April we get the report from the actuary.
Okay. Fabienne?
Is there any way we can, because in one of the paragraphs it goes on to say, for 2017-18, 2018-19, the actuary will then roll forward the valuation for accounting purpose based on more limited data. The fact that data is limited surely increases our risk, and how can we get more concrete data so that we're actually doing proper planning rather than basing it on something that is already noted as being insubstantial?
Like how the process works is like after every 3 years they take everything in terms of that specific area, like all the employees, like it involves so much of data gathering exercise from the council. So what they do is then do their estimation techniques. But to do this process every year is very time consuming, and also the resources involved are too much. So what they do on the basis of that data which they get there for next 2 years, they just ask for, in terms of the overall numbers of employees plus the average of their salaries, so that they can incorporate if there is a significant change into the previous results and then roll it forward for that year. Like in terms of the investment sides, pension fund on each year gets the confirmation from the investment managers and fund managers that what is the value of the overall investment. So that is not a risky element. It's just in terms of the scheme members, that's where I think in terms of too much resources being involved, it's not being done every year.
It's a very long-term game, and therefore it's kind of on value for money basis. There's no point in trying to do it exactly every year.
This is what I asked last time, and it's said there's a board now that's been set up with the chief financial officers on it, and there's an investment strategy that was in place to recover the fund deficit over the next 20 years. I'm a bit concerned, 20 years for deficit, and it's not linked in any way, is it, to Northampton County Council?
In pension terms, I would suggest 20 years is fairly short term. And what I'd be more interested in is there a recovery plan that the individual authorities have to contribute to do the recovery plan to create the shortfall? And then separate to that, do you as auditors check their investment strategy over the funds that they have on management to also help bridge the gap? But are all the individual councils expected to participate in a recovery programme over the next 10 years or so, 20 years potentially?
Yeah, the initial messages coming out from the triennial valuation is the last triennial valuation was in 2013, and the overall fund was 71% funded at that point of time. Means we have the enough assets to cover 71% of the liabilities going forward. But the messages coming out from this triennial valuation is we are moving on to 77% funded. So obviously, in terms of overall scheme, it made a good progress, and that's what the plan is going forward. The contribution rates are going up a bit, so it's for this year they are suggesting 16.8, so that over the period of next 3 years, different employees are contributing more into the pension fund. So over the whole term of 20 years, what will happen is there will be a time when we have enough assets to cover off all the liabilities. So what they're doing at the moment is over the period of time making contributions a bit high in terms of employee and employee, so that we can cover off that deficit over the period of 20 years.
And that's been agreed by the pensions
Board,
authority.
yes, and by the authorities as well.
Do you want to just answer that question about the council? I mean, the scheme covers the county's employees, but it's separate to the county council.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
Sorry,
like,
we're already...
I'm only helping you.
Yeah, just to get my head around it. So do all the district councils in Northamptonshire pay into a pot that is administrated or managed by the county?
no, then
How does
we
it
have
work?
a separate allocation of our assets as well. So the overall scheme is made up of everyone, but then we can identify how much assets for that specific employee.
It's a separate scheme.
I almost need a diagram
Yeah.
so I can see it.
So you've got all the authorities on one hand, and the pension on the other hand.
Okay, yeah.
That's a separate scheme to all of the authorities. That's managed separately from all of these. So their financial issues don't touch the pension
Okay,
scheme.
so if I was an employee of Kettering, I would then pay into this pension pot. But do other employees from other districts pay into the same?
All of the ones in Northamptonshire, yeah.
Okay, right, so it's Northamptonshire. And so that's all of, and do the county councillor workers as well pay into that?
Yeah.
And so that is managed on behalf of everybody, but it's separate to the other thing. Oh, yeah, I'm there.
And what is the current employer contribution and employee contribution?
It's different for different employees.
At the moment, we are paying 11.5% employers' contribution, and employees pay a various ranges of rates. Going forward to next year, we're paying a 16.6% contribution rate, but there's also a fixed pension element we pay. This year we're paying about £1.3 million. Next year's joined to £900,000. So the overall increase about £55,000.
Not material.
Not material on that part, no. We are one of the better authorities in the county.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, I've got it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to ask anything else on revenue recognition or management override and controls? And as Audra's not here to defend herself, now is the time to do it. No? Okay. Want to carry on?
So then, over the page on page 5, we just set out a couple of other areas which we will look at as part of the audit, but aren't as significant in terms of their potential risk or impact on the accounts. And the first one are some changes to how the accounts are going to be presented, which is about the way that that means that the accounts will reflect more how you normally present them through the committees and the management accounts that you look at. Previously, they were kind of reclassified into a standard format. That's the nub of that one. So it's a slightly technical change, but most people are saying it should actually make the accounts slightly more understandable. I don't know what accounting colleagues think about that. Maybe a bit more sceptical.
I mean, if you're trying to do any comparisons, each authority's got its own way of structured out. And we take what Tony's in charge of in the resources team, we'll be going down as resources on the face of the accounts, which means nothing to the reader, unless there's more detail in there.
Anyway, we have to, this is what's going to be
It's
required.
required by law.
Exactly. So these are and we'll be working with the finance team to make sure that those changes are applied appropriately. And then the other one is about the provision for business rate appeals, because you're aware, I'm sure, of the ongoing challenges around business rate appeals, and therefore it's an area of estimation for the council, because you have to make a provision, which is, if you like, a judgment about what you might be losing from your business rates, and therefore that's because it's an area of judgment. It's an area that we look at a bit more closely.
The only thing that I've raised this before, I don't like the materiality factor set at $500,000. If you take Councillor Fabian's comments about 4.4, 500,000 seems quite a lot in materiality. And if we are standing up in the chamber defending our mistake of 375,000 or more, I don't know where you've set to, I do feel uncomfortable still with the materiality that's set at this level. I know it's a factor of the scale of the authority. I'm not sure the public would see us making a mistake in 500,000, which wasn't necessarily seen as material.
I can understand that, because in the public's perception that's a lot of money. Indeed, in everyone's perception that's a lot of money. I mean, we try and explain it a bit more, and we try and set out the fact that we are looking at errors of a much smaller amount, and so we talk about the fact that we would report to you errors of above 25,000. And we would obviously, we still talk to the finance team about any smaller errors, and those are sort of corrected within the accounts if we find them. But it is just kind of the way that audits are planned. I mean, actually 1.4% isn't, you could have a higher percentage, and it would still be acceptable to the sort of accounting standard, the auditing standards. So we have tried to take it down a bit.
So why can't you just take it down? Why can you not just say?
Because the lower it is, the more it means we do more work.
All right, so that then costs us more. All right.
So
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
I mean, it's trying to get the right balance.
Yeah.
But it's also basing it equates to 1.4% of expected growth expenditure. So are we saying that our growth expenditure is expected to be around about 35 million?
Well, this is the eternal debate about the money we collect on behalf of others is classed in the process, not the net amount you see. And I think that as part of that net expenditure is quite high. Because how much do we collect on behalf of the county?
Council tax about 44 million, business rates 45 million.
Yeah. And this is based upon that total gross figure, not necessarily our expenditure as an authority.
So it's not like for like, really, is it? Because we're just collecting the money and you pass it on.
But if you like, that's actually working in the favour of more. Because we're looking at that bigger amount, we have to look at those transactions that go in there. So we have to, those are all things that could affect the account. So we have to work on that basis.
But it's my hobby horse, so while I'm chair, you get every year.
And actually, we understand it. Moving on then to value for money, the second major objective. The pages 7, 8 and 9 and 10 really are mainly talking about how we go about it. And then page 11 articulates the focus of our work for this year, what our work will focus on based on our risk assessment, which, if you like, remains the same. We talked earlier about the fact that we have to look at the way you plan to use your resources, and that's a key challenge. We also, you're looking to develop projects and programs, some of that are about developing income streams. So where you're doing projects and changes, those are things that we look at to see, are they going to give an assessment of are they going to provide that help in closing your financial gap that they're planned to have. And also when you do a project, then that has risk in itself, so understanding how the project was done is another important element to look at as part of our value for money work. but I think that overall the financial position and the challenges remains quite similar to what we looked at last year.
Any comments?
And then the rest of it is very straightforward. It's the timetable, it's your audit team, it's our declaration of independence and objectivity, which is, a very important requirement on us. We have to look at it throughout the audit, make sure that we remain independent, and that's it.
Members, any comments on that overall document for the external audit plan? If you're content, I would ask the committee to note the plan. You're content with that? Yes. Thank you.
I'm not trying to do that at all, but just to make the observation, obviously the auditors and foundations, but also bear in mind this history, if you like, our pedigree and such like, and taking a judgment about risk as well. So have that comfort without being complacent.
Well, I was going to talk about your pedigree, but since you brought it up. Thank you, Simon. We need to, I think, move on to the certification of grants and returns, which is the next item, and starts with the letter to Audra on page 37.
Yes, and really, because this is a fairly brief report, it is only in the form of a letter. Again, some of you may remember that we used to do an awful lot of grant audits as part of the audit, but now we only do two, which is one, which is the housing benefit one, and this letter shows the results of that audit. It's quite a detailed and extensive audit, quite a lot of technical aspects and a lot of testing, because I'm sure you're aware, housing benefit involves a large number of transactions and calculations and addressing changes of circumstances and so on. So we just report on what we found, and we haven't made any recommendations to the authority to make for improvements. And we also report what the fees was that we charged.
Members, any questions?
I was surprised that you didn't give any recommendations. You found there was a case which was wrong, and then you carried out another assessment, 40 cases, where you identified 7 of those were incorrectly assessed. So that's 17.5% was incorrect. That's done the maths right. I'm just surprised you've not said perhaps somebody needs further training or something like that. It seems a high figure, 40 and 7 are wrong.
Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, like in terms of how the claim letter is set down, is there is always a limit which is an error acceptable limit, where we put down a figure saying that if authority makes errors till that limit, that's acceptable to DWP. So whatever the error we found was within that limit. So that was the reason we haven't made the recommendation saying that, yeah, we made an error, but that's a kind of acceptable principle that this is throughout the process. There are some errors which may be made due to different reasons, and department accepts that. So that is the reason for not making the recommendation.
So there's something like a plus or minus 5% wrong and they ignore or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Sorry, so is this acceptable errors to do with value or to do with numbers of cases?
It's the total value of the claim, how you can process.
So it's the value.
Yeah.
So therefore, but still, if all those cases were of a higher value, then there would be recommendations made. Is that what you're saying?
What we do is whatever errors we found, we then multiply that with the total population to see if the whole error was in the total population, and then against that figure we compare to what is acceptable to the department. So it's not just like for 17 cases we identify the number. What we do is whatever the error we found in those 17 cases, then replicate that across the whole population to get the number that what is the error if we have to apply, and then if that's within the limit, then we say yeah, that's acceptable to the department.
It's like a racial report.
Yeah. Is that related to, I think, paragraph 4 on page 38, where it's a 0.2% of the value of the claim? So is that, in terms of ratio, it's a 0.2 error rate?
All right.
Yeah?
In
Which is
relation to
less.
value.
Value.
In terms of value.
And which, of course, is an improvement over the prior year,
Exactly,
which
yeah.
was 0.5. So whilst we've had 17 of the 40 samples, the value of the error has been reduced. Okay. Are you all content to note the report? Hang on, sorry, pause on that.
Well, I just want to give some assurance to members that though we haven't had any recommendations from the auditors, we have made assurances to the DWP that we're going to be looking at the areas which were identified, making more quality assurance checks, and we're looking at trying to reduce those errors, mainly, most of the errors were actually through
Is this the minimum residence?
Could be.
We're mainly through data input and get a figure the wrong way round, and we're looking at systems to actually reduce that, so there'll be less chance of that actually occurring going forward.
Okay. Are you happy to note the report? Thank you. We move then on to the KPMG progress report and technical updates, which explains progress on this year's audits and the timetable to go forward.
So just to talk about this one, I mean, the summary of where we got to is on page 4, and really that just kind of tells you what we've been doing so far. The only thing I pick out is that we have run a workshop which we ran across the whole of the East Midlands around early closure of accounts. So I'm sure you'll remember that the timetable for the closure of accounts is coming forward, particularly actually in the year after this, and that means that accounts have to be produced earlier and we have to audit them quicker in order to meet that deadline. So that's quite a key challenge for both finance teams and auditors over the next year. So that's the only thing I'd pull out there. In terms of the progress report, I mean, this is mainly for information, so we're not trying to make any point, if you like, of report to the council. What we're trying to do is say, look, here's some information that you might find useful or interesting in the discharge of your duties. So we cover various reports that we've produced. We have a thing called an Audit Committee Institute, which some members know about because we did some training with Audit Committee members across Northamptonshire. We drew on some of this Audit Committee Institute material, and so it's just a way that KPMG gathers and spreads good practice on audit committees. And so here we're talking about the risk that technology gives rise to, and the sorts of things that audit committees are thinking about at the moment. So then that takes you to the appendix, which has the R16, 17 timetable and deliverables. So just reminds you, if you like, what we're trying to produce at different times in the year. So really this report is mainly for information, but happy to take any questions on it.
Members, any other points? Fabian?
Do we have, you talk about cyber insurance on page 11, do we as a council have cyber insurance?
Chairman, I can answer that. Yes, we do. We have some level, but it's something that we have been discussing around reviewing our risks recently, and it's something that we're doing some further work on.
Yeah.
Do we have our cyber certification on the government scheme?
No, I think we're being...
Okay.
It's going to be a consideration.
So, I think I was going to touch on cyber risk when we look at the risk management stuff later on.
We'll wait till then, Tony.
Yeah.
So what's the significance of the certification?
There is a scheme that the government have about cyber threats and protection,
Right.
and the way in which you structure your IT, i.e. data systems, and safeguards and protections you have in. And I think there's 2 or 3 levels of cyber certification that you can get dealing with public data. We should all be considering that in our processes.
So if we're compliant, we get a certification to say we are compliant, which is a reassurance thing.
It's not perfect, but at least you've got some of the right things in place.
But surely that must then reduce insurance. Maybe. Marketing.
Any other questions for Jonathan and Andy? Can I ask the committee to also note this report? All content? Have you got any further points you'd like to make?
No, I was just going to say, Chair, that we would be happy to make our departure soon, but we'd be happy to stay for the next item, which is about future appointment of auditors. Not that we can add a lot to that one, but there may just be some questions that we can answer in terms of that.
I'm sure we'll be very happy for your wise inputs into the next one.
Well, we'll see, won't we?
That moves us neatly on to item 8, and can I ask Rebecca to lead on that?
In 2014, they had introduced the new Local Audit and Accountability Act, which brought in new arrangements for the appointment of auditors, local authority statements of accounts, mainly for from 2018-19, with transition arrangements up until then. The Secretary of State has identified public sector audit appointments, known as PSAA, as an appointing person under the Local Audit Appointing Person regulations. And basically this gives them the ability to appoint auditors on local authorities' behalf if we opt in, and this is known as the sector-led option. There are 2 other main options, which are either to establish an independent standalone auditor appointment panel ourselves, or to join with other local authorities to establish an independent panel. However, the independence requirements for these panels, which are set out in a separate set of regulations, are extremely onerous and would be very challenging to implement in practice. I should also say that 4 other local authorities within Northamptonshire have already opted into PSAA, so they wouldn't be interested in a joint arrangement anyway. And the other ones we understand are currently in the process of going through approving opting into PSAA as well. The sector-led option under PSAA would reduce the risk of the auditor appointment process and the risk of not being able to appoint auditors in the required timescale and within the new regulations. And also because it's pretty much a national operation, it produces economies of scale, which also make that procurement process cheaper. The regulations require that any decision to opt into the PSAA arrangement is approved by full council in time to notify them of the approval to opt in by the 9th of March, hence coming to this committee with a view to recommending to council next month. And therefore the committee is being asked to consider recommending to council that it accepts the PSAA opt-in option.
Members, any questions?
Do we know what sort of savings that there would be if we went with the PSAA at this stage?
There's no quantifications in any of the paperwork, but they're expected to be fairly significant. Procurement processes are quite time-consuming, and we would be looking for specialist assistance with it as well.
Richard?
Yes, so with regard to we opt in, does it cost us anything to opt in, or do they take over the procurement processes and so we actually save money and time?
Opting in.
Oh, right.
But because that fee reflects the economies of scale by the nature of the operation, it would be lower than doing it ourselves.
But all right. So there's a saving by opting in, by then taking the administrative role and the procurement
Yeah, so
role.
those administrative costs which we would put the bill for ourselves are shared amongst.
Would we lose staff as a result of that?
No.
No. Okay.
Previously it was done centrally.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I misheard you. Did you say the PSA, they appoint the auditors?
Yes, they're an appointing body, so they've got they meet the independence requirements.
So where you've had KPMG for 3 years? There obviously comes a point when governance takes over that after 5 you should do a churn on auditors. Is that what happens with the PCSA? They'd say, we've had them for...
They will have a review. They could appoint the same once again, or they may determine that it's appropriate to change it, but they would be able to take that view.
Even if you've had them in excess of 5 years?
Yes, it's unlikely you'd keep them, but sometimes people do.
Do they? That's different.
I think, Chairman, if I may, I think if that was the case, then we'd be looking for a rotation of key staff from the auditors themselves. So,
and there is an option within it that you can appeal to change the auditors. So if you wanted a change, you could request that.
They go on to say that the PSAA has demonstrated its capability in terms of auditor appointment, contract management and monitoring audit quality. Are you happy with that standard, and are you happy with that? Against what standard have they been? So 55%, I think it... No, sorry. I don't think that's a reduction in fees, but are you happy with how it's been monitored?
Our understanding is that it's something we would be very happy with. It's not inconsistent with the current and previous arrangements.
I think it's worth noting that the current arrangement that we have with KPMG is in fact a PSA arrangement. They took on the responsibility when the Audit Commission was closed.
I mean, just on the quality, I mean, they do, we don't sort of surface it that much, but they do monitor us, and they, we have to submit lots of returns to them, and they also make sure that there's a quality regime. They don't actually carry that out, but there is an inspection regime of the audits and so on. So
the audits are audited.
Correct. So, I mean, it is a fairly, it is a fairly highly regulated and sort of scrutinised regime. And I suppose that from our point of view, it's not going to be, it looks not that dissimilar to what the Audit Commission just did previously. So the Audit Commission, their responsibilities were given to the PSA. The Audit Commission has ran these exercises before, and what they did is they basically divided the country up into chunks and then awarded contracts to different suppliers. So that's what we anticipate will be something of that kind of order, the carving up nationally.
Go on. Yeah, Chair, I think this is a pretty straightforward option. As Tony said, it's basically the current arrangement. It's not like we're going to appoint any Mickey Mouse auditors, as it already was. And I'm very happy to propose it if that's what
I'm happy to take comments, but we need a second then for the recommendation.
Can I ask the members then to agree to recommend the advice to Council at its next meeting in March? 4%? Yes. So thank you very much. Thank you. And I hope you have a safe travel home. The next item is the revenues and benefits penalty and prosecution policy. And I think Tony is about to put his head on the block, given that last time as a committee we considered it at the last meeting and felt that the paper wasn't robust enough, and we asked them to come back to this meeting. I think Michael's here to help. Tony being put to the sword. However, what I would point out is if we're not happy, then this report will have to go with caveats in any case to the February strategy meeting because of timings and the process. So whilst we're very happy been scrutinised at great length. If you've got the same concerns we had last time, we need to go in this form with our concerns documented to the strategy. So, Tony, over to you.
Well, thank you, Chairman. That's the introduction done for me. But essentially, yes, we went away and looked at the policy in light of the comments that were raised last time, and believe that we've addressed these in the documents before you now. The way the report set out in section 4 of the report actually takes you through the changes that have been made to the policy. So I'll just run through those quickly. 4.2 is dealing with the robustness and the clarity of the intent, and the introduction of the policy document itself has those words that are in bold text, and that fraud against the council is not acceptable in any form, and the council will investigate and take appropriate action to counter any fraudulent actions perpetrated against it. 4.3 deals with section 2, and you will recall that one concern was that there was a lack of reference to the Chief Financial Officer in the policy, and that has been addressed in section 2 of the document. 4.4 deals with sections 3 and section 4 of the policy, and particularly around evidential criteria and public interest test criteria. And there was some discussion around that at the previous meeting. And what we've done now is to clarify that criteria used will be those as included in the Code for Crown Prosecutors, along with the latest guidance from the Crown Prosecution Service. So we're taking our lead from the Crown Prosecution Service. Section 5, that's 4.5, talks about section 5, no penalty of prosecution. That section has been amended to make it absolutely clear that a warning letter will be kept on file. I think the view was that that wasn't as clear as it should be. Section 9, paragraph 4.6, that section has been simplified to make clear that penalties will be imposed for failure to supply information and or failure to notify a change in circumstances. Section 4.7 gives a little bit of contextual information in terms of numbers of cases that we're currently dealing with. So on that basis, Chairman, the policy is presented back to committee asking for your endorsement. The approval route is via strategy group as it is a policy document, and then on to council. Thank you.
Okay, members, any comments given the changes to the document as suggested?
I just think it's looked a lot better than the first time around, so I hope the officers do. Just for me, on 4.7, where it says the estimated financial impact of these cases is in the region of 85,000, did we actually lose £85,000 on those 177 claims?
No, we can't actually say that. We've done some testing, and again, similar to the position that the auditors were mentioning earlier, if you extrapolate that, then potentially it could be in that region.
Right, thank you.
But without investigating those cases, we couldn't actually say.
Right. Do we have any individuals who are persistent offenders?
Perhaps Michael might be able to help with that.
I can't actually say there is any persistent offenders at the moment with council tax reduction. As we're only actually in the third year of the scheme, the policy is there to try and support us to look whether or not there is any persistent offenders and be able to take remedial action against them. Presently at the moment, we're not able to take any action.
I don't know whether I've missed it, but so for me it's about, so you have the investigators, all right, that actually investigate the fraud, and then they presumably identify the fraud, And then does some cases go to the police on referral, or are they? It's that element, and it's, I wonder whether that should actually be in the policy to say, okay, so a fraud is identified, almost like a diagram. So fraud is identified, goes to police because of this, or is investigated internally, and then who is the decision maker? Actually, how does it work operationally? Does that make any sense?
The flowchart.
Yeah, flow, yes.
So just before Michael comes in, if we turn to page 74 of the papers, page 4 of the policy documents, that actually sets out the options in terms of actions that we could take. I mean, Michael may be able to speak in more detail about that. So we'd look at a potential local authority caution, penalties.
Yeah, but I think what we're going to be careful of is this is a policy.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the level operational. Yeah. And this we're going to put the policy to strategy into council. We have to delegate to the officers that operational
the tactical options to do it.
And I'm sure Simon would take you through it externally to the meeting.
I do next to Chairman, but I'd also give you some assurance that, for example, our anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy has a flowchart supporting it as part of what we call a response plan.
I think it would just be nice to see, for me, I'm very visual, it's nice to see, well, actually, how does this thing look operationally? And even as a strategist, it's nice to see that point. And the other point I'd like to raise is that, it would be nice to see at some stage actually the results. Exactly how much money does this strategy bring back? Having lost it, how much does it bring back? And for me then, it's all right having a strategy and a policy, but does actually it do what it's meant to do? Does it say what it says on the tin?
We reported back.
Yeah, and so when we do get that, will we get it back here?
We'll get that back here. We'll request that back here.
Yeah, to have a breakdown to say, this policy actually has, we lost 85 grand, but we have recovered so much, and then the explanation as to why there are any shortfalls. Is that fair?
Yeah, just in terms of reporting back, just to confirm, we bring an annual report to this committee on fraud activity and investigation, so we would include the actions under this as part of that report.
And could we ask that separately outside of this, you just circulate the flowchart that you just talked about, Simon, so that you've got some visual clue as to what it looks like?
So I can show you what we've got, which is in terms of the anti-fraud, bribery and corruption, and then what's being developed.
I was going to add to the sort of debate on this as well. Michael might be able to sort of explain the difference that is between the frauds that come in within the anti-fraud and corruption response plan and those that are dealt with by this policy. And I think it is highlighted on the page 74 and 75 in terms of we don't have interaction with the police involved in these cases. It's down to us prosecution, us undertaking the prosecution off the back of the legislation.
And another point I thought of is that how much would it cost to implement, and how much, whether there's a scale that we could see that would give us an idea if we were going to implement this, the goes to strategy and to the full council, whether or not we make savings and whether it ends up costing us.
Tony?
Yeah, I mean, that is an issue for strategy group in terms of providing the resources, but we're doing a lot of the work, the early investigatory work with our current resources, and what we're actually proposing to do is use this policy to take those cases on. So it will be delivered largely with our internal resources and some legal support.
So in the reporting back then, Tony, can we look at what our return on investment measures are? Because clearly that should be a simple way for us to tell whether our investment in this is actually worthwhile. Are we taking the right cases on, etc., because you've got some options in 4 and 5 here. It would be interesting to see what our return on investment measures are.
There is also rub, though, isn't there, with regard to the cost of enforcement, the cost of investigation against actually what you get back, but also there's the moral, the actual, the ability to investigate, because actually acts as a deterrent as well. Yeah, so of course we don't know how much. So did you say that you don't refer any of these cases to the police?
Michael might be able to explain this a bit more, but in terms of this policy, any that come under this policy are directly prosecuted via ourselves.
Yeah. So, but there is no. But this policy surely should reflect on that there is an option to go to, because it's your.
Currently, we're exploring. If I go through the process, effectively when we identify that there is a fraud being committed, there's two options. One, we're preventing an ongoing fraud, so there's the saving which we make in terms of what we're preventing the loss to the council going forward, and also what is actually currently already the authority has been defrauded from. Where there is an overpayment which they've already received, that we actually recover 100% of that because it is added directly back to their council tax bill. We don't, we've actually given you the money, but we actually put it back onto the bill and say we will take recovery action to recover that full amount of money. With regards to the prosecution angle, previously we used to operate alongside the DWP where we would do joint prosecutions. As you know, since the separation of that role, the DWP are now looking at going back down that avenue, wanting to work again with local authorities to do joint investigations and such, because they are aware that we are undertaking an investigation and they are undertaking the same investigation in fact, but they cannot prosecute on our behalf and we can't prosecute on their behalf. So at the moment we're in discussion about how we can start to do that jointly, and that's been tested at a national level through a pilot. So I am hoping to go over to the Northamptonshire meeting to discuss how we can move that forward with Daventry. I'll just cover the police point.
Yeah, cover that police point.
Well, effectively, with regards to the police, they would. I've actually only ever seen it actually happen once where the police have been involved, and that's normally where there's actually serious organised fraud. So effectively, you may be aware of a case of a couple in Halifax who were actually prosecuted by the police because of the organised fraud which they did across the whole nationally. So they got involved there. Normally with the smaller cases which we're talking about, they don't have an interest in that.
I think we get this where Councillor Walker's coming from. I think it's because this is a policy document. Obviously, that's about our position. It's probably the procedures involved with it and the kind of way you approach it, which is probably the most interesting, actually. Because I was thinking, as you were saying, about where you would set this on item 8, one of the first bullet point, where there is evidence that the person was a ringleader or an organiser of the election. So, how would you even be able to establish whether somebody was a ringleader in such a case? So what kind of methods could you use to determine that?
Well, effectively, when the investigators investigate, besides taking in, they do different surveillance techniques. They actually do different data gathering techniques, and they also use the interview under caution, where they use different techniques to ascertain what's actually happening. They then start to look to see whether or not there's a pattern, whether or not there's multiple frauds. So I can give you an example of when I was involved in another authority where there was one person who was actually responsible for multiple frauds going on in a number of streets. So a pattern starts to appear where you identify, is there a key person who's linked to the, for example, a landlord, so you can see that that landlord is prevalent through all the cases. So actually, yeah, it's identifying that pattern. With council tax reduction, it's probably there isn't going to be that kind of pattern because it's an individual property and individual account. So we're probably not going to be identifying as many ringleaders, and one, because the monetary value is probably not as great. But what we have identified is that there is a number of cases where we have identified there is an error on the council tax reduction, and the claimant is actually also receiving help towards their rent, and we are not able to proceed due to the rent element. So effectively, we've advised the DWP there is an error. We've referred it to them to ask them to investigate their side, and we're awaiting the DWP to come back to us. So, for example, if we've awarded a single person discount and then we've identified that they're not a single person, we should be amending our account. But if we do so, we would actually give them full benefit when actually the other person probably is working. And what we're saying to the DWP is that person shouldn't be getting job seekers allowance because they have a partner who is working. So effectively we are unable to amend the account until they've carried out their investigation.
But I mean, not wishing, but making a judgment, a lot of these people presumably don't have the money to, they're defrauding it. Aside from obviously the ringleaders, they're defrauding the council because they don't have the money to pay back. What is the likelihood, aside from being able to obviously blacklist them and having the letter on file, how often do we get the money back? How many cases do we actually get the money back?
Well, certainly with the council tax reduction, it's added directly back to the actual council tax bill. So we will take them through the normal recovery avenue, and we're actually now presently going through an exercise where anybody who owes us large sums of money, we've actually written to them all, actually saying what action we're going to take to recover that money. So we're looking at...
And do they still pay monthly then?
Yes, they would get a revised bill saying what they would need to pay. The policy is about actually us being able to impose a penalty for not actually telling us about they've had a change in their circumstances. At the moment, all we're doing is adding back the council tax. What we're trying to say is we're going to impose a penalty so that it educates people that we're not going to accept that going forward.
Can I lift us back into the policy then? And say if you're content with the policy as proposed following its revisions, can I ask for a proposer and a seconder, please? Okay, so the seconder, Javier. And then can we resolve to take the advice and pass that to strategy for the next meeting in February? Yes. Thank you all. Thank you. Internal audit. Scott, mid-year review, how are we getting on?
Yeah.
Don't talk about staffing shortages, will you?
No.
Good man. And where we are on the performance indicators.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is the mid-term progress report, which comes to this committee in terms of how the cycle is across the year. It will look at the progress towards achievement of the audit plan and our other service commitments. We'll also highlight to them if there's any significant matters of interest from the audit work that we've undertaken up to the end of December. And it will also review on outstanding matters from last year's annual audit review. So in respect of the audit plan itself, it's been somewhat a challenging year from a resource perspective for myself and our team, but it is one that we have been, or I have certainly been directly managing myself, and we have sort of turned a corner. During the course of the year, I've had 3 temporary auditors, and we've appointed to the permanent senior auditor post at the beginning of December. The resultant loss, as I've referred to in the report, up to the end of November was in fact 52 days, which is not insignificant in terms of undertaking audits and what the percentage of that is across the year. But with the current level of resource that I do have in at the moment, we are making good strides, and we are back on course now to complete the audit plan. I'm confident we'll do that by the end of the financial year. One other significant resource matter has been resolved. You may recall over 18 months ago, we were looking to get some corporate fraud resource in, and we've done that. And the last aspect of that was to get some IT audit specialists in. You may recall from a previous report that I was unable to jump off the back of a framework agreement, so I had to go through a procurement exercise myself. We've done that now, and we've appointed TIA Limited as our IT audit specialists. They have started very recently, and as part of their first piece of work, they will be performing an audit needs assessment, and they will recommend to me and management a risk prioritised plan of audit reviews for the next 15 months. We will then negotiate on that in terms of what's right for this authority and what aspects of work will be picked up by internal audit and others. The results of that work will be formed within the internal audit plan, which will come to you in April. Despite the resource issues we've been having, we've still been progressing actions contained within our service improvement plan, which is on page 79, paragraph 4.6, where I've listed out for you here a number of aspects we've achieved and some aspects that we are progressing and are under consideration. Notable achievements have been the revised internal audit charter that came to this committee in September. We've also made some progress in review of our audit process, and we've refined our quality and management review processes. I mentioned the appointment of the IT audit specialist, which is a great need for us and the authority. In terms of actions that we are currently progressing or under consideration, I mentioned before about the external review of our service, which is a review that's taken once every 5 years. We're looking to start that process off very soon in terms of determining what that would look like, and for then the review to be undertaken in the summer. We are looking to further develop the 17-18 audit plan and show for you a better linkage of our audit work to the Council's strategic objectives and risks, to show how we support that. I mentioned before about us, and I mentioned this in the members' training for those that were there in November, about an assurance mapping exercise that I'm looking to do. That work has started, and that will better support the risk management framework for the authority. We are looking to do a more comprehensive review of the risk management strategy and the corporate risk management arrangements prior to us reporting to you in the annual audit review in June. We're looking to do a bit more of an in-depth review on that this time, rather than our commentary that we normally do and then the support from the management's annual report. But we're looking to do a bit more. So we're looking to then, with the results of the assurance mapping, to try and come up with one or two suggestions, enhancements to our current framework off the back of that. And we are also still involved in developing the fraud risk register as well, not only for us but for management. But we will be determining a programme of practical work off the back of that as well. Again, that will be shown within the 17-18 audit plan, which will come to the committee in April. With regards to the current position, with regards to the audit work, in respect to completed work to date, members will be familiar with the, or hopefully be more familiar this is a table that appears in all of our reports on page 80, paragraph 4.9. This is where we talk about the level of assurance that we give for audits, and also the percentage of agreed recommendations that were implemented. So these are two what we call barometer indicators that were set some years ago by the committee as a target. In terms of the results for those at the moment, or the current position, you'll see there that we've got a ratio of 92 to 8 in terms of the ratio split between our audit opinions. and also then the 100% across the board in respect of agreed recommendations implemented. And that figure actually represents not just this current financial year, it's actually a rolling 12-month indicator. So that is 100% of all recommendations that have been put to management have been formally implemented. None have been recognised as being not implemented at the point of our follow-up audit work.
Has that been a conscious decision to say, well, if you go to the effort of auditing something, then there is now an expectation within the organisation, the culture, that those recommendations are implemented?
Exactly that. It's a testament to management and the mechanisms that are in place for prioritising internal audit work over the other priorities that they have. There's I think one of the paragraphs in here in the report, 4.11, talks about some of the things that are in place for that, one-to-ones between management, the attention that's received at the risk working group and also the IT steering group, and generally then the response from senior management to the periodical reports that I produce for them on outstanding action plans, on the outstanding action plans. So,
Go on. Yeah. So, let me understand. So basically, at the end of December, that means that over that rolling period, 100% of all the findings and recommendations had been implemented.
Yeah, for the rolling 12-month period prior to December. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Right. So it's the first time in this table that we'd achieved that level.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, we've always focused on the high priority ones. When you look at the percentage then of the medium and low, this is the first time we've ever achieved anywhere near up to 100% of those. The focus has in the past been on the high priority recommendations because that should receive management's attention, but that's not to say that the medium and low shouldn't be, but they've been giving priority to those as well.
Turn that into a number. How many recommendations roughly does that relate to?
I knew you were going to say. We've said before about the low number of high priority recommendations that are made over the years with the improving control environment that we've had, hence the introduction of the latter one there, this percentage of all agreed recommendations. We're probably in the region of, there might be in the region of 50 to 60 recommendations across the 12-month period.
Final question, my Chair. So, in terms of your time and the team's time, that's quite a significant investment, isn't it, to go out and actually verify that action has been taken?
Hence, what we've done over the past 4 to 5 years is we used to have an environment here where management maybe were not giving it the attention it was. We didn't have the mechanisms in place. We were undertaking, for those members that have been here, we were undertaking follow-up audits when we were prescribed to come and do them after 3 or 6 months. We were finding that a lot of the recommendations weren't implemented. So you may have the same high priority recommendation come up at the follow-up, it's not done, come up again, so it gets almost double counted. What's happened over the last, and you can see that sort of progression, that's what's for the 4-year table, you can see that progression of attention that management's giving it. And it's now more a case of why that percentage is so high is that all of service management and senior management have access to all of the action plans. We don't have a proper system in place. It's purely word-generated action plans and they've got access to, but they proactively populate them, and we don't start the follow-up until it's ready to be done. Now, if we felt that there are action plans that aren't achieving their target implementation dates and there's some delay in that, we will bring that to the attention of the risk working group. And it's at that it gets the attention to the senior managers, and then it has that cascade down to the service managers. And we normally don't get that, but 1 or 2 areas, with other priorities they have, there may be occasions where that happens. But the whole process seems to be working for us really, so that we all are almost coming to the point of doing a formal follow-up where all the recommendations are considered implemented. And that's where we come in and go, well, okay, it's considered implemented, let's see if it's effectively in place.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Thank you very much.
So, I just think I think the council should be commended. I think that culture of get a grip and improve is is really encouraging, certainly as an elected member and for the people we represent. That's got to be something that we want to continue, obviously, but it needs to be commended and recognised.
I'll take that, Simon.
Very grateful for that. It is about having the right attitude, and to be fair, it's the attitude across the council. It's embedded, as Scott says. We've been doing this for some years now. It is an improvement. My word I used earlier, I would use again. We'll not allow complacency to set in. But yes, I would like low numbers of recommendations, and I'd like a high percentage of implementation. But what I won't let it do is mask anything that's not quite right. And the auditors have that role to play, and long may it continue. But we do have the right attitude. I would say that, but I genuinely believe we have the right attitude. Okay, in respect of then the completed work to date, you will notice that we currently have no minimum assurance opinions been issued to date, and at the moment we've only got one audit of corporate nature that's been completed, and that was in respect of cash and banking arrangements, which is mentioned within paragraph 4.14. I don't intend going through the detail of that, but what I will do is that's a very recent-ish audit, but it's been given priority and of the attention of the Chief Financial Officer, and certainly she has voiced her encouragement to management to ensure that these are implemented as soon as possible. And in fact, we've already started an early follow-up on that, and I've just had nearly hot off the press just earlier that we've nearly got to the position of confirming that the recommendations have been implemented. New to this report, to provide a bit more information to members about the other work that we contribute beyond the formal audited stuff. There's two sections that I've introduced into the report on page 82. One of those is around the counter-fraud strategy and our delivery of that. That is a responsibility of mine now with the resource that I have, and there's a list of activities there that we have looked to put in place and enhance and encourage awareness of during the course of this current financial year. There is reference at the end of 4.15 to a couple of investigations that have been where we've been commissioned by the monitoring officer Simon to undertake investigative work on behalf of management, but it's not really for this report to go into the detail of that work. It's just to express what we've done. The management will consider that as part of their annual counter arrangements report at the end of June that comes to this committee, and then they will summarise that accordingly. The other area which is emphasising the non-audit areas or the consultancy work we do is in section 4.16. We provide a lot of support and advice to the risk management group, corporate procurement and efficiencies, IT steering group, the local code of governance. So we have a lot of involvement where we will provide advice and our commentary to enhance the control environment around those aspects as well, rather than us actually providing a formal audit report as such. And then in there I've mentioned about where we are, and this is something that probably I should have mentioned before a while ago, that we are actually part of the process for verifying certain arrangements up to the point of contract award for all contracts over £50,000 in the authority. It was a management process that was put in place probably 4 or 5 years ago, maybe more, whereby, and it's been enhanced over time in terms of the things that we check. So every procurement over 50k that comes to a point of contract award, we will look at all the corporate governance aspects of that. We will verify the financial budgetary aspects. We will also then verify the contract and procurement process has been followed accordingly, and we will also ensure that any project management methodology aspects are dealt with, such as a business case to committee or a project brief. So we do that for all projects, and I thought that was useful to mention that. And in fact, from that work, quite a bit that's where most of the breaches of the Constitution come from, and you see the summary report that comes to you in June. That's that type of work that we do that picks up most of those. So although we're part of management and we deal with this consultancy work, it actually is almost like proactive auditing, and it's very useful to us and to management to do. With regards to last year's annual audit review, on page 83, the only outstanding issue from last year's annual audit review is on information management and records management. Tony has provided some management response there, but in terms of the information management aspect, the recommendations have been considered and implemented on that part, with an outstanding aspect in relation to records management, and management giving further consideration to determining the classification requirements for information. It's a bit more involved in terms of, we've had some involvement in that, looking at a automated approach to that for our email communications, and it will also be wrapped up within the projects that's currently underway on looking at the general data protection regulations as well, which are being applied to this authority and others. So overall, without saying, and we've mentioned some of these things, the picture is good. From an internal audit perspective, we've turned a corner and we've now got the resource in place, and we are continuing to develop our service. And from an internal control environment, you can see from the figures that we've got here, how that's playing out.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things really. The first one is I always appreciate Scott's report and the way he walks us through it. I think it's very logical, clearly and well written. So I'd like to compliment him on that. The second thing is, after many what feels like years of asking, I was very pleased that Scott ran the training session. I think I learned, I'm sure we probably all did learn a great deal from that and the way we approach it. Start to get a bit of a feel for the topic. And of course, these always raise more questions, particularly you use terms like audit protocol, etc. So again, that's probably one of the best sessions I've been to actually for training. I think you really did a great job. Thank you. And I can't let the final report go without asking you a bit more about 4.14 and drawing you on an issue. It's quite true when I read it before that we've got this issue of one of the recommendations being that Daventry Country Park includes parking signage in the cash and banking arrangements. Could you please go into a little bit more detail about that one item? Thank you.
Bear with me a second, I'll try and find it on because we've made actually 12 recommendations as part of this particular audit across a variety of areas.
It's an intriguing list.
Yes. It's almost, we do a lot of work, we do a significant amount of work on income receipting. We're currently doing that work at the moment. And this is a bit of a hodgepodge of all the other areas that probably wouldn't get some internal audit attention solely. So it's across the board, including looking at the bank arrangements as well. On the aspect of the display boards, it's to do with, I'm just running through here, it's to do with freshening up those boards to be a bit more specific about the parking fees and something like that. I haven't been down there myself, but the auditors, as part of that process, actually went down on site and we were trying to determine whether that signage was clear enough.
It's really interesting. So that's quite typical if you just go and do that level of field work. So you go and say, let's have a look actually at basically the money capture side of it and the communication, etc. And will we break because of the way you're picking up on the side, you're breaking any of the rules there or anything, or any particular issues? What was the issue that we need to be clear about, for instance? It's a good example.
I don't think we break the rules. I don't, inadvertent breach, perhaps. Break them.
Just running down what the issues were in here, and these boards do not reflect the option to purchase a season ticket, for example. There's an option.
They're also not very clear.
Yeah,
They're not very
clear.
clear. Not
They're not
very
very
not
clear.
enough
Just
boards and even
just visually and where they are and placed. And we're going through the process. There's two things that the authority's going through at the moment. They're having an extension to the car park. They're also looking at potentially looking at a cashless system as well. So it's a good opportune time to sort of look at it all together.
Good. So for me, taking it back a couple of is kind of reassuring to know you actually go into that kind of level of investigation, inspection, as it were, as part of the audit.
Yeah.
And actually marry that up. So that's good. Thank you very much.
So
No, you go.
I mean, it was just with regard to your resourcing issues, was that just due to a difficulty in recruiting the right person, or has there been other barriers?
It was. It's always difficult to find internal specialists for an authority of our size. We've always had, it's one of those areas, and there are other professions within the authority where they struggle to appoint. So there was a delay in that. Because of that process being delayed, we took up the option for the very first time to bring in temporary auditors, and difficulty that comes with that in trying to induct somebody into the process. For different reasons, the first two temporary auditors didn't work out. One for personal reasons and the one not being quite fitting in. The third one has been exceptionally good, and we've managed to get somebody in that's the internal manager of the head of internal audit in a European firm. So we've been very lucky in that regard, and we've still got that person until mid-February. So we're doubling up at the moment on our resources. That's what we're able to sort of pull it back.
But you know, that's a critical aspect, isn't it? For you to do your work, for us to improve, for the public to get benefit from that improvement. You know, maybe something needs to be looked at as to how to resolve that problem. And I'm not going to tell you because I don't know how to resolve that problem. But it's important that you have the right amount of people with the right qualities, with the right experience to do that work.
Yeah, hence us looking at the resources in terms of us putting our hands up and saying we haven't got the, maybe with the way things are going with the IT side, technology side, that we haven't necessarily got the resource to go to the level of degree that I would want to for our generalised auditors. You know, we can do audits of those areas, but it's what you're told. You almost have to sort of
you have to trust in what you're being told.
Yeah, so now getting that IT audit specialism in, like other authorities of our size have, we've now got that going forward.
Thanks. I'd just like to echo some other comments. First of all, it's very demonstrative, this report, of your progress, your acumen as a team, what you've in terms of what's been succeeded. But just one thing, and it's always easy to provide scrutiny, but I just want, if you can answer me this on 4.15, counter fraud update. Knowing that there's a corporate fraud officer, it's just a facilitation of service manager training taken externally by Zurich. First, there's a few questions here. First of all, is that a requirement to be compliant with anything? Because to me, could that not be undertaken by the corporate fraud officer? And because in terms of cascade training, that's achievable, as it is in other institutions. And I don't know if there's a planned update yearly, because then there'll be another cost. But do you think that could be achieved?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is part of training and awareness at different levels across the authority. The fact that we used Zurich for this was because we've got a pot of money that is sitting there unused through our insurance arrangements. This is part of the training that they can offer up. So rather than us maybe end up losing that money, we've said, well, okay, bring them in. And in fact, we're going to use this pot of money to take it down to the next level for line managers and supervisors. Now, that's not to say that the corporate fraud officer couldn't undertake that work themselves. They have got a number of other things. It takes a lot of effort, as I appreciated, to put together training for a session. It really does, beyond the 1 or 2 hours that it takes to undertake that. But what they will and what they are doing is they're doing more targeted training. So we're starting to go out off the back of, say, some of the investigations we've had, employee bribery and housing application. We're starting to go out to those areas, build up a bit of rapport with them, and as part of the fraud risk register work we're doing, we're asking managers who are responsible for those fraud risks, how are you mitigating that by training and awareness? And if it isn't there, we're getting the corporate fraud officer to do part of that targeted training as well. So it's a bit of a training and awareness can be done in different ways. Some of it's we also have the e-learning module that is already there, it's available, and it's mandatory course for all employees to do. We're looking to completely revamp that, and we're in the middle of doing that with the help of HR.
That's great. Do you think that pot of money is always going to be there? Do you think it's going to be rebuilt next year? Just succession planning and, you know, how you're going to administer that next?
The pot of money isn't mine.
Can I answer that? It's part of the add-ons to our insurance arrangements, and another example was the risk management training we did the other night, where Zurich came in and do that. They're add-ons to our insurance package, and as long as we've got the arrangement with or the contact with Zurich, that'll be there. But we will put that up to procurement in due course anyway. So it's while it's there, we'll use it. It's sensible to do that.
Just to make the comment, one of the advantages, of course, of having the likes of Zurich is you get a fresh perspective, you get an external approach, you also get some verification across other authorities, so you can compare yourself. So that's quite helpful. You don't want to do it all across the board necessarily, but on certain areas it's quite helpful. And I think the risk management Tony's just mentioned,
very good.
It's been useful, hasn't it?
It was very good.
Various years that's been great, I think, wasn't it? So it's a blend, if you like.
I mean, I'd also say as well, in terms of we have externals in, sometimes they can miss the local aspect of it. I didn't exclude myself from this training. I was actually on this training myself, and the corporate fraud officer was there as well. So we were able to give that sort of local part of it as well. So it became a bit of a joint exercise, which let's hope we can sort of take that further to that line management supervisors as well.
Thanks.
Can I just ask on 417, on GDPR, who's leading on that from sorry?
I am Chair.
Because clearly the marketing requirements, I'm having to learn quite a lot about GDPR recently. I know that we don't have, I would suspect that we as an authority don't have any of the right things in place to send out things like Daventry calling, let alone anything else.
We're working through our requirements at the moment. We've actually got a working group set up to deal with that. And the first phase of what we've been doing is actually doing an information audit to understand what we've got that we need to protect under these new regulations. And it was interesting, I had an update meeting on that this morning, and that exercise in itself has been quite useful, and certainly we've got managers thinking now about the sensitivities of some of their data. So that work is going on. The effective date is May 18. So we're well on course to have proper measures in place for that.
Does any other member have any questions for Scott? Can I ask us then to resolve the two items of advice on the original paper, which is we acknowledge the progress, which I think we've all done very happily, and that we endorse the management's response thus far. Thank you. We can then move on to the risk management process. This wonderful black and white RAG document.
Really useful.
And ask Tony to lead on this.
Yeah, Chairman, the wonderfully described black and white document in fact is for information as opposed to being the substance of debate treatment. It's evidence of work that's been undertaken. But let's start with that. I mean, that is the strategic risk register, and we're going through a review of the register at the moment. So I've attached it to the papers as a working document, so you can see that something is happening with that. approval process for that is through strategy group and council. But for useful for this group to have a look at it. The process, I mean, we've had various sort of references to risk and risk management as we've gone through the meeting tonight, which is good actually, because it shows that we are considering risks in all that we do, as opposed to it being a sort of standalone subject. But in the strategic risk register, what we do is we look at our risks from bottom up and top down. We have risk registers that sit aside each of our service plans. Those are reviewed annually. The significance of any risks arising from that are fed forward into the risk management working group. Scott made reference to that group. That group also receives risk updates from the resources working group, which looks at our financial risks as part of their work, and also from the ICT steering group, which looks at risks around our IT systems and information flows. So information comes through there. We also tie in with the review of the corporate strategic plan. Our strategic risks are around the deliverability of that plan. So what we've done as a group, we've had a look at our risk register in light of information coming from bottom up through various groups, what we're seeing in the corporate strategic plan, and have made some suggestions to change. And as I say, those will be going through to a strategy group and a council. I think one thing just to touch on, as I said I would earlier, is around cyber risk. And cyber risk isn't specifically identified as a strategic risk within the register, and it is something that we've had some discussion with. Certainly came from the ICT steering group. There's been some further discussion at SMT at our meeting earlier this week, and the need to see that we're properly addressing our risks around cyber security. So that's something that hasn't yet fed into the working copy that you've got there, but will be included in the document that goes on to Strategy Group and Council.
Can I suggest when you look at the cyber security, you put GDLP on? Because I think that is a strategic risk for all organisations.
Yes.
Yeah. Members, what's anything you want to know? Information?
Sorry, that's just part of our progress, Chair. We do much more than the strategic risk register, but if you're happy...
I'm assuming that this is the top of the pyramid.
Well, it is.
Yes, and given the training that was had the other night, I'm confident that my colleagues also assume it's the top of the pyramid. The internal question that I would ask, I've asked this question before, is about risk tolerance. And where that fits, and of course annually we would expect to see that how you reviewed the risk tolerance. It says these are the strategic risks rather than the operational risks that are in that pyramid below it. I'm not sure that's for this meeting.
Well, perhaps if I can just explain a little. I mean, we review the strategic risk register annually, and it comes to this committee as an information paper, essentially. It's undertaken a more robust review this time round because it's a 3-year review and ties in with the review of the corporate strategic plan. So it does get a closer scrutiny every 3 years. In terms of our risk tolerance and risk appetites, those are set out in our policy documents and the risk management toolkit. Those were reviewed and the policies adopted by the Council July last year. So that has gone through recent review, and in fact it could be as part of its journey through that.
Kevin,
just after this document, when you look at it, are there the district councils presumably do a similar thing? They have to do a similar document. Are the documents relatively the same? So if you pick the top one, would that be sort of top one in Kettering or somewhere?
I think that probably. Across the whole of local government in the UK, I think if funding is would be.
I've got my strategic illustration in front of me because I wanted to check the cyber security thing. My number one is government and local authority spending. Oh, what's it here? My number two is Brexit. Oh, what's number two? My number three is devolution, which wouldn't affect us as a local authority. My number four is legislation and regulation. Well, you could call that the service demand. Governance requirements, fundraising controls, it's that specific to work. Pension deficit.
So you've stolen this one, is that what you're just saying?
They're very similar. So I think you'll find this is... But it was the cyber security one I was particularly interested in.
Check. I know this is strategic, but presumably does each department have an operational risk assessment? So it's actually the same process, but just looking at how the departments are working and what risks there are to that department.
Yeah, each service plan has a risk register as part of that plan, and that's the risk management working. So if there are risks which are being managed at each team, but it's a consistent issue, then
Let's come to the strategic.
Do we have any questions to take on?
Chair, a couple of things actually. The first one is, I think this is one of those other documents where councillor able to give us some kind of flowchart or models. And the other one's really actually, sorry for this, very pedantic, and that is actually, one word of note that is actually we're resolving this evening, yet on section 4.2 is relating to something in the past tense, which will relate to the future. I'm sure it's not particularly an issue, but...
So can I ask the committee to resolve the advice? All agreed, yeah? We have no urgent business to consider. Unless there's any other business from members, I'll thank you all for your input. Officers, thank you all for your time this evening. And if you could just note somebody to order, we hope you can expect us soon. We'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.